Hello, and what is up, everyone? Welcome to another episode of Doop on the Volley, Philly Sports Network's union-specific podcast. And we have yet another pregame podcast here for you as the Philadelphia Union are getting set to take on Atlanta United this afternoon on a Sunday, which is a little weird. We were just kind of talking before the show of how it's like it feels even longer since the last match. But we also have to talk about how the Philadelphia Union are the only remaining unbeaten team in MLS and how they got that done last week down in Nashville with some late game heroics after it looked like they were kind of falling apart. But before we get into that, I'm Tim Lovinguth, and we have here Eric Freisinger. Eric, how's it going, man?
It's going well. I'm excited for an afternoon Union game. Like you said, it's a little weird having it on a Sunday, but I still prefer it over a late game.
It's so true. Like having these afternoon games, I don't know. There's something special about it. I wish it was a home game because it's so nice here. But you know what? We get to watch it on our TVs. Maybe have the window open. Have a nice time here. Jimmy, how's it going, buddy?
Good. Like you guys, it does feel a little strange for the game to be on a Sunday, and especially in the afternoon. I think it kind of feels special because it kind of reminds us of waking up early. If you're a Premier League watcher, it's kind of that same routine of getting up early on a weekend, which is supposed to be your day off, and then just filling it with soccer. And the Premier League games are kind of finishing up right now or getting close to it. And then right after that, we'll have a couple MLS games to top off the weekend. And I'm just excited. It's today and yesterday were my first 2 days off in 10 days from my day job. So I definitely needed it. But at the same time, likewise, every week talking to you guys on this podcast, writing articles, it gives me an opportunity to kind of break away from all that like normal, mundane, everyday life stuff, and gives me an opportunity to kind of like enter into this alternate world, which can be really frustrating at times. But I've had a lot of fun just like talking Union soccer and writing new articles. I had a MLS fantasy article come out for the first time this week that a couple people hit me up about. So I just am enjoying talking soccer and getting away from all those other things in life that aren't as fun to talk about. So appreciate you guys being here. I'm happy that we're able to talk about 3 points down in Nashville, and hopefully we can preview another win today as well.
Yeah, maybe we might be on the start of another win streak here for the Union after they crash out of international competition. It seems to be the norm over the last few years of seeing that happen. But let's get right into how the Union got it done in Nashville. So just to jog everyone's memory, last weekend, the Philadelphia Union did travel to Nashville SC, and Jim Curtin kind of switched things up a little bit, going to a 3-5-2 formation, and the team looked shaken up. They did not look very good in the first half. And to be honest, Nashville didn't really either. It was very much neither team really wanted the ball, it seemed like, and sitting in defensively, things like that. Nashville did get on the board first with Sam Surge getting a goal just before halftime. And then the Union, in the second half, they came out, kept the same formation, the same lineup until about the 60th minute when Curtin went to the bench and brought on Bizo and Ali Bedoya. And 2 minutes after that was Carranza's goal, which was when the Union went back to a 4-4-2 and they just played direct. It was Jose Martinez finding Quinn Sullivan, who kind of toe poked the ball over to Carranza, who smashed it home. And then late on in the game, Daniel Gazdag was not marked on a corner kick, and he just was wide open and finished it. And the Union got all 3 points. So, Eric, I'll kind of throw it to you. Like, how do you feel about this latest win?
Well, first of all, I was able to watch it and we still won, so that's a good
Hey.
sign. Yeah, it was good. It was good to see once again that kind of tactical flexibility and that willingness to change when things aren't working. That's often been a criticism in the past of this Union team, is kind of being stuck in their ways, and even when things clearly aren't working, not being willing to change it up. And for the second game in a row, we've seen them change things up and it pay dividends. So that's a really encouraging sign. Also, you've got Gazdag continuing to come off that international break with scoring form after getting criticized by his national team coach. Really, I think there's a lot of positive in this. I mean, it's another comeback. Obviously, you don't want to have to keep coming back every time. But it kind of plays into that mentality thing that we've talked about a lot. They show that strength to not wilt when they go down, and that strength to not just not wilt, but really even come out stronger.
Yeah.
It would still be nice to see a full 90-minute performance, but that's easier said than done when you're on the road in a hostile environment, which will be the same with this week. So yeah, all in all, very, very positive signs, and there's a reason this team is the last remaining undefeated team in the league.
Yeah. Jimmy, just kind of going off on that, like, and talking more about the team's resiliency, like what kind of stood out to you the most from this last match against Nashville?
Yeah, I mean, I think like most people, the first half didn't look super put together or super strong. I think Oliver Semla did a great job in the first half again to keep the game at 1-0 a couple times, even before Surridge had scored the opener. But again, like Eric said, it was they recognized what was not working and went to something different. And Kai Wagner came out of the game with a slight injury, which they brought Olivier Mbaizo in, moved Nate Harriel over to the left, and I believe then they also brought in Ali Bedoya and moved Quinn up to the top, correct?
Yeah.
If I'm remembering that correct. And like you said, Tim, it paid off right away. They started going a little bit more direct. Quinn Sullivan with a really great effort play to shuttle that ball over to Carranza for the opportunity. And again, it's, for the fourth time this season out of 6 games, Union come from behind to earn points, and 3 of which they conceded the opening goal. So there is a real mentality in this team right now of not giving up and not saying, never saying die. And Jim Curtin talked about that in the press conference after the game and said it all has to do with the players and their mentality right now and the confidence that they're able to be building and the trust that they have in each other to get the job done, even when things aren't going right. So that's really positive signs early on, especially, looking at it now. As things stand, the Union are on 12 points, 3 wins and 3 draws. And the Supporter Shield leaders, I believe, are back. I think it's back to Inter Miami with 15 points. But they have 2 games in hand. And I believe, I think Galaxy might also have 15, and they have a game in hand. So Union, if they win tonight, effectively go to the Supporter Shield lead, having that game in hand, and having an opportunity to play for that on the road, and battling, CONCACAF Champions League early in the season. We know how much teams struggle doing that. And so I think I think there are signs here that this team has something that they can build off of and compete against amongst a long season, even after crashing out of a competition where we thought things were going south. So I really liked, again, just the resiliency, the mentality to battle back and just get it done. And one more thing to note on that, Daniel Gazdag, 55th goal in Union history, puts him just one shy of Sebastian Letou as Union's all-time leading goal scorer across all competitions. Almost half of them have been from PKs, but still an incredible achievement that Gazdag will almost certainly achieve in the next handful of games, I would hope.
Yeah.
And then it's all him rewriting history from there and seeing how high he can take that ladder rung up. So yeah, that's all I got on the Nashville game for now.
Yeah, I mean, it's just kind of crazy to think about. Just while you were saying that, Jimmy, the response of this team after losing 6-0 at Pachuca. I mean, if you look at the standings and the results from that, they went to Austin and got a draw. They probably could have come away with 3 points there, but all right, at least you got a point on the road there. They went to Portland very shorthanded, not having a lot of their players on international duty, and got a 3-1 win. Then they came back home, and I think it was their first real 90-minute performance against Minnesota United, where they won 2-0. And then last week, they go down first at Nashville, and they come back and score 2 goals and get the win. This team is resilient, and I think we're going to see a lot more of that here in Austin. Or I'm sorry, in Atlanta. But just real quick before we move on and to really preview that match, Eric, I want to throw this to you. Do you think we'll see more of kind of some lineup changes, some formation changes heading this way, or do you think Jim Curtin kind of goes back to the 4-4-2 diamond now that it seems like a lot of the players are back in form and healthy?
Yeah, I think we'll probably start out with the 4-4-2 diamond. You never know if things aren't working for whatever reason, then we might see some more adjustments, maybe drop back to that 4-4-2 that we tried a few weeks ago. But yeah, I think most likely we'll probably see that 4-4-2 diamond to start out with.
Yeah.
Before we kind of on that same topic, I'm kind of interested to get your guys' opinion on this before we move away from it completely. But from your guys' perspective, what do you think kind of went wrong with the 5-3-2 or 3-5-2, whatever you want to call it, formation on Saturday night? Do you think it was do you think it came down to just being too just not being aggressive enough, or do you think letting Nashville come at you? I couldn't really pick out what I thought was wrong, other than I thought adding that third center back in there kind of made that communication amongst the center backs a little harder, and that was really the only thing that I was noticing as to why it wasn't going to plan. Or maybe it did go to plan. Maybe the plan was to keep the game close in the first half and then change it up in the second half. But I just wanted to talk about, before we move on from this Nashville game, what you guys kind of saw from that and why you think it didn't necessarily work. Although Jim Curtin said he didn't think it was as bad as maybe some of us are kind of talking about.
Yeah, I think the main reason why it didn't work well was because, you're playing against Nashville at Nashville, and they like to sit deep as well. So if the Union are in that 3-5-2 and they were looking to play direct from the center backs up to the strikers, and then maybe find the midfielders or the wing backs off of that, it was very hard to get those passes completed against the Nashville team, who was lined up the exact same way. And it seemed like the spacing was just off a little bit. Like you were saying, Jimmy, you noticed that the center backs were kind of almost getting in each other's way when they had the ball and want to just try and build up. I don't know if that's just because they haven't played in it much recently, or if it was really the game dictating that. But it seemed like the spaces just weren't there to attack in. I mean, that was my takeaway from it. It seemed like the midfielders as well. We all know McGlynn likes to drop deep and kind of get on the ball. It was kind of hard for him to do that, with the center backs also trying to take that space and occupy that. And the way Nashville was kind of pushing in the first half. I kind of agree with Curtin. It didn't look terrible, but it just didn't look right. And that was kind of my takeaway from it. I thought they needed to find ways to be more direct. And when they switched to that 4-4-2 diamond, they found the balls over the top were a little bit easier, and the runs were easier to make off of that. I think that's how we saw the first goal. And even the second one off the set piece, the way that they were attacking was just much better when they were in the 4-4-2 diamond shape late on in the match. But that was my take from it. Eric, what do you think?
It felt like they very much felt like a team that lacked familiarity playing that way.
Mm-hmm.
That was the most the thing that stood out the most in terms of their struggles for that. The other thing was a little bit, like you guys touched on, a little bit of confusion amongst the center backs and trying to pick up the fact that Nashville doesn't necessarily have a ton of guys playing forward all the time. So you've got 3 guys trying to mark 1 guy, and then you got to communicate well in order to have that spare center back picking up who they need to be. And that was lacking a little bit. But yeah, I think really just the lack of familiarity with that formation played into it the most.
I do think it's important to say, though, and maybe this kind of translates or could translate over to tonight's game. When you do look at Nashville's statistics in the offense, in attack, Hani Mukhtar was pretty quiet over that game. I thought Union did a pretty good job of kind of neutralizing him. If you look at it, he had 0.05 expected goals, only took 1 shot, and it didn't hit the target. He did have a decent night passing, completing like 83% of his passes, I believe, and had an expected assist total of 0.5, which did lead the game. But other than that, I mean, he had, I believe he had the most touches in the box for Nashville, 6, and only had 1 shot on net, or 1 shot, not even on net. And, didn't even accumulate 0.1 of a XG total. So I think Union did pretty good job of kind of taking him out of the equation, which, we'll get to that in a little bit, but Atlanta has a couple injuries today, and the focal point of their attack, as it normally has been in seasons prior, is Thiago Almada. So it's going to be, I'm interested to see if Union can kind of keep that same structure in eliminating the other team's kind of playmaker. And I thought that was something positive to note, even with the kind of disgruntled looking 3-5-2, 5-3-2, whatever you want to call it, in the first half.
Yeah, that's a good point there, Jimmy. One other thing that we haven't really mentioned yet, as far as this match is concerned, is that I know you mentioned him a little bit, but Ali Semla was back in at goalkeeper, and he had another fantastic night. I was looking at the stats just recently. I think he had 4 saves in the match, and it really comes up big in those moments where you need a backup keeper to come up big. When we've seen, Andre Blake had a little bit of injury problems the last few years, or international duty that kind of takes him away for a while. You need that stud backup keeper, and I really think Semla is kind of the signing of the offseason for the Union so far. I wanted to get your guys' take on that. What's your take on Semla now that we're 6 games into the season there, Eric?
Yeah, I agree. He's really stepped up in those big moments. And there's going to be more to come. We already know there's going to be international breaks. So I agree with you that I think he has been the signing this season. He's almost playing too well, though. I don't know. It's going to be a little difficult to hold on to him, I think, past this season, because there are definitely other teams that need a solid goalkeeper. I mean, just look at Miami's goof this past week. Yeah, he's been I think better than any of us could have hoped. I think there was optimism around his signing, but I don't think anyone could have foreseen him being this good. Yeah, especially this quickly.
It is really interesting that you bring that up, and it just kind of reminds me of how the Union kind of when they had Matt Freese as the backup goalkeeper, and they kind of brought him up when he got those few games that he got, he was showing that he was legit. And I do think you're kind of on there with that. Freese wanted to leave and become a starter, soon after that type of thing happened. So we might be seeing that with Semla as well. I hope not. I hope he wants to stay here and maybe if Andre gets a move or anything like that. I don't know. I don't think that'll happen. But Jimmy, what's your take on Semla here?
Yeah, I mean, we've talked about it. The guys on the team have talked about it, but the guy has come in right away and not only performed on the field, but is a great teammate off the field. It seems like, and that's obviously going to make the people in front of you trust you, play better for you. And I think, the only thing I can really add that hasn't been said about him right now is the level of professionalism that he has to continuously come into games between Andre Blake and have big performances and then immediately get dropped once Andre's back. And he's taking it like a champ right now. That's a really difficult position to be in, be named essentially man of the match in Portland. And then the next game, you're riding the bench again. And then you come in that game for an injured Andre Blake, keep the clean sheet, win the next game, and now you're likely back on the bench. That is the life of a backup goalkeeper, and it's a tough life to have. But I think you're right, Eric. I think, we could have some teams knocking on the door, trying to get his signature at some point or another. And I wouldn't even, I can't blame anyone for that. He's been really, really good, and he's shown, like I said, not only is he a good shot-stopping keeper, but he seems like he's a good teammate as well, and someone that you would enjoy having on the team. So, yeah, I've really enjoyed watching him this year. I've enjoyed the very little bits and pieces I've seen him interact with people in kind of the mixer after games. It seems like he's getting along well and enjoying life in Philadelphia. So, I'm really enjoying Semler right now.
Yeah, and like you just said, Jimmy, we're likely not going to see him on the starting 11 when it comes out here in a few minutes. Curtin did say that Blake was back in training, so yeah, it'll be interesting to see what kind of develops with that throughout this season. As Andre will still be forever the number one starter as long as he's here. He's a club legend, so we'll see how everything kind of plays out with that. But I think it's time for us to kind of move on now and talk about the game against Atlanta that we're going to see this afternoon. So I guess, Jimmy, I'll throw it over to you first, because I know you were mentioning that there's some injuries that Atlanta is dealing with that is very vital to possibly the Union's success today.
Yeah, absolutely. They have a number of guys that are listed as out today, a couple of which are very, very important, and a few that are kind of role players that step up in kind of absences of some of these guys that would be out. So I was trying to look to see if I could find a projected starting 11 for Atlanta, either through an article or somebody that covers the team locally, and I couldn't really find one. And I think a lot of it comes down to maybe people are just not sure who's going to play. Probably the most important player to note that is out for Atlanta today is going to be Giacomakis, who is leading the team in the goal scoring category. But they are also missing their backup forward, Jamal Tiare, I believe is how you say his name. And he scored 3 goals in his past 2 games, kind of filling in for Giacomakis while he's either been, taken off the game, or I believe he was kind of dealing with a little bit of this injury in previous games. So in the attack, Atlanta has a few names already that are going to be out for today's match. In addition to that, Jean de Silva is also out, another piece to Atlanta's attack, and I don't think he has any goal contributions yet this year. But he was a guy that put a few goals in the back of the net in the playoffs for them last year, and has been a good addition for them. So he will also be a miss in the attack. And then when you look at the defensive side of things, Gregerson, he's been out for a while, I believe, nursing a knee injury. And now what I believe was his partner, Derek Williams, in the center back pairing, is also out with a calf injury. So Atlanta missing key pieces both in the attack and in the back line, which could serve to be an issue for them, and could come at the most opportune time for the Union, trying to keep not only an unbeaten streak alive, but trying to advance a win streak to 4 games as well for the first time this season. So Atlanta are missing a few players, but Union are getting relatively back to their full strength. We were talking right before we got on the stream. Everyone that you would expect to be in the game for Union is there. And the only people that are out are, let's see here. We got Holden Trent, the backup keeper, still out with a finger injury, which is not as big of a deal because Oliver Semla will be on the bench today with Andre being back. And then you've got Isaiah LaFleur. He's out with that knee. I believe he tore his ACL earlier this season. He'll be out for the whole season. And Leon Flock still listed as out. But we got a note from Jim Curtin this week in his press conference that Leon has returned to some sort of training at the Union facility back with the team. Now he's not, I don't believe that he's training with the other guys yet in full contact type stuff. But he is back at the facility training on the side, and he could, it looks like he could come back to full training next week, which is a huge addition for the Union going forward.
Yeah, that is, like, we were talking about it before we came on. Leon Flock and him possibly being available in the coming weeks would be a huge addition for this team, whether or not it's if he, comes in and could be a backup 6 or maybe fit into a 4-4-2, like on the left side of the diamond, or even how we've seen the Union play in a flat 4-4-2. If they want to kind of play defensively in that center of the park, they could have him next to Brujo, and they could have two kind of very good defensive midfielders in there. But that's very interesting to see. We see Atlanta very banged up. We see the Union kind of rounding back into full health. Eric, I know the lineup isn't out yet. It'll probably be out in the next few minutes. But how do you think the Union kind of go about attacking a weakened, should we say, Atlanta team?
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see their approach to this game, considering the kind of dual nature of, like, yes, they're going to have a lot of people missing, but it's still an away game in Atlanta. Which is, it's always they always have a good atmosphere there. They've got that big stadium.
And just to kind of,
go ahead.
To go off that point, Eric, while you're bringing up, being in Atlanta, tough environment, Atlanta on the season, they have 3 wins, 1 draw, and 2 losses. All 3 wins have come at home. They're 3-0 at home, and they have 2 losses and 1 draw on the road. And so obviously they're much more comfortable at home. It's going to be a much more difficult game than it would be if we were playing them at Subaru Park. But sorry to interject there. I wanted to bring up that point so you could, just piggybacking off the fact that this is a really difficult game on the road. Yeah,
and not only that, but we've only ever won there once, and that was in the Champions League a couple years ago, back when it was still the Champions League. In the league, we haven't won there. So it's still, despite any absences for them, it's still going to be a very tough task. Part of me's feeling like this is going to be a multi-goal victory for one of the teams, and I'm just not sure which one. And I can't really put my finger on why I'm feeling that way. It just feels like it's going to be one where we might typically expect it to be closer, and that's why it's going to go the opposite direction. But I think the key for us is going to be putting in a good performance, regardless of the end result. I think as long as we would expect to put in a decent performance against a weakened side like that. Sure, they might ride the crowd's energy and get the win in the end, but if we can play well, I think that's going to at least partially keep that feel good factor that we've been generating going, whether or not we get the result in the end.
It's interesting you say that, because I actually was thinking about this either this morning or yesterday. I feel like the last few games, when we've talked, I've listened to other people talk, a lot of the games have been approached in a way of like, we don't necessarily need to win this game, but we need a really strong performance. And 3 games in a row, they have gotten that win, and 6 games in a row, they've gotten what we would consider a positive performance. I was kind of just wondering to myself, like, when does that expectation amongst the fan base change within this group? Are we there yet to kind of say like, hey, you should be going down to Atlanta against a weakened side and getting 3 points or at least a point? Or are we still in that phase of piecing together things early on in the season and getting over that Champions League hump, and it's still in the early goings and a loss is okay here? Where are you guys kind of standing on that? Because I see that kind of differing amongst people on Twitter, which obviously we know reactions on Twitter can be pretty dramatic, but I wanted to kind of gauge where you guys sit on that. Are we at a place where we're starting to expect to win again, or are we still it's still a little bit too early to be there yet?
For me, I think it's still a little early to be there yet. I always have said in the past, the recipe for winning trophies and winning points is you draw on the road, you win at home. That's the recipe for success, especially in MLS where there's parity across the league. If you can do that, you're going to be at or near the top of the standings. But I understand why there's a lot of fans who might be saying that they expect to win with seeing the team's current form. And thinking back, the past few years about how successful this team has been, if you talk about a full strength Union team going against a possibly weakened Atlanta team, even in Atlanta, I understand why some fans are thinking like, oh, this should be 3 points right now. But at the same time, like Eric said, the team has never won in Atlanta in a league game. So it's always difficult. And there's always things that go up in the air and it's craziness of MLS that you just can't predict. So I think, honestly, right now, no matter the result in this game, I think the team is going to be all right, barring any major injuries or a total beatdown. I think this game, falling where it is, and with next week being a bye week for Philly, I think that it's actually going to be okay no matter what happens in this game. You want to see a win because a win takes you to the top of the Supporters Shield standings after 7 games, which is, it's too early to think about that anyways, but it's just really cool to see after what happened in Champions Cup. A draw is probably the result that, not that the team is going to play for, but I wouldn't be surprised if we see the team kind of playing for that later on if it's already tied. And then, a loss is never good, but it's at this point of the season, if you lose at Atlanta, it's not going to ruin the season. So that's my take on it. All of the aspects are covered.
Yeah, I'm kind of taking it on a game-by-game basis. I think at home, the expectation is always to win. And then for away games, kind of like you were saying, Tim, like you want to draw on the road and win at home.
Yeah.
I think that can vary team by team. So for this game specifically, playing well without getting a result is still a positive. It keeps that positive momentum going. But if it was a different team, maybe a team that we'd expect to beat, then it would be a different story. Then we would want that result. And it really varies. I think even if this Atlanta team was in a stronger position, I think we would maybe hope to worry less about the performance and be okay with getting little possession and getting one chance and hitting them on the counter. Yeah. I think there's a lot of variables to play into it on the road, like you guys were both saying. Like it's kind of a crapshoot in the league, playing on the road. I mean, no one expected us to win in Portland because we were down so many people. Right. So it really can go anyway.
It really can. And as we were just talking, the lineup just came out, so I'm going to share it here on the screen for everyone to see. So here is the starting 11 for today's Union match. We see Andre Blake coming back in goal, and then we have we're back to a back four. We got Nate Harriel, Jakob Glesnes, Damian Lowe, and Kai Wagner coming back from that little injury scare, which is good there. The midfield, we got an interesting addition of Alejandro Bedoya getting back into the starting 11 and captaining the squad. Jose Martinez, of course, is sitting down in the bottom of the diamond at the 6. Jack McGlynn on the left side as well, with Daniel Gazdag at the 10. And then up top, Julian Carranza and Quinn Sullivan are the starting strikers for today. And we, when you look at the bench, you see, interesting names of Jack Elliott being dropped, and Ua's back, at least to make the bench, but he's still coming back from injury as well. So it's just kind of interesting to see. Jimmy, I'll kind of throw it to you first. What are your thoughts on this starting 11 for the match today?
Yeah, I mean, I think in general it's a little I wouldn't say shocking. I'm not shocked by it at all, but it wasn't something I necessarily expected to see Ali Bedoya get to start. Although I don't think it's necessarily an awful decision. I think maybe having some of that leadership and that awareness and just calmness on the ball and in the game in general in the midfield could be a little beneficial to Union right now, especially at times with Quinn and McGlynn in that midfield. Defensively, it can fall apart just a little bit. They're both pretty attacking. So I think with Bedoya back there, it just kind of adds a little bit more stability in that midfield, and especially if you're playing a guy like Almada who can change the game on one kick. Maybe that's maybe a little bit of assurance there is beneficial in the first half. But I think the other big thing for me is Lowe getting the start over Jack Elliott. I was not expecting that a lot or at all. And I won't give much of a take on it because I'll let Eric kind of give his take on it and see if he has any thoughts before I steal all that shine.
Yeah, I was noticing that. That's what I keyed on at first too. That coupled with the fact that when we switched formations last week, Elliott was the center back that came off.
Yeah.
So not only is he not getting, he's theoretically a little more rested, but he's still not getting the start there.
Right.
So I don't know how much of that is Jim Curtin liking what he saw from Glusness and Lowe, or how much of it is not liking what he saw from Elliott. It's hard to say unless he comments on it specifically. I think whichever pairing we have, we can expect good things. So like you, I'm surprised, but I feel like I shouldn't be in some ways. Just because we've seen all of them have good performances and some issues to start, but especially lately they've all been kind of rounding back into form, so to speak. The other thing I'm noticing is we have Sullivan up top while we have 4 strikers on the bench. And obviously some of those can be kind of moved around if they were to come on, and if we switched formation, we could see Anderson on a wing if we played with wingers or things like that. But I did find that interesting. Obviously, Sullivan feels like he's undroppable right now, so that's probably why. Plus, you've got Ua coming off a bit of a knock, and his speed could be very beneficial going against tired defenders later on in the game, particularly if we've already got the lead. If we're hitting them on the counter, Ua can be pretty devastating. Not even necessarily with finishing, but just making those runs and then playing off the ball to another person up top. So there's definitely the potential for some strategy there. It's just a little weird seeing 4 strikers on the bench with a 2-striker formation. But yeah, kind of like you said, it's a surprising but not shocking lineup. And I agree with everything you were saying about Bedoya bringing those leadership qualities and a little bit of more defensive stability.
Now, really interestingly, he's only played 1 game for Atlanta so far, but the person that looks to be starting at the striker position for Atlanta today, with the absence of Giacomakis and TRA, is Daniel Rios.
Yeah.
And if that name sounds familiar to you and meets your brain with some disdain, it's probably because he scored 4 goals against Union when he played for Charlotte in a game where if Union won that game, they're probably hosting MLS Cup at home that season.
And won Supporter Shield. They would have won Supporter Shield as well.
Exactly. Yeah. So I don't know. I don't know if Daniel Rios has the same sort of kind of I don't know if that means as much to him as it means to us, that game. But seeing him on the score sheet kind of gives me a little bit of it gives me a weird feeling. I don't like it.
Yeah.
And I don't think he's anywhere near the level of Giacomakis. But I didn't think that when he was with Charlotte too, and he put up 4 against us. So
Yeah.
I think that's one to look out for. And yeah, I'm interested to see how that plays out. That's like I said, he's only had 16 minutes for them so far. I think he had a slight injury after his first appearance. So yeah, well, that's one to watch out for sure.
It definitely is. And then the rest of, they're playing in a 4-2-3-1, the way that they normally like to line up with Rios up top. Of course, Almada is going to be sitting underneath him. So that's as you were saying before, Jimmy, he's the real danger man. If you give him time and space, he's going to pick the right pass or the right shot. And we've seen what Rios can do in the past. We'll see if he can kind of put it together in this game. But then the rest of the lineup for Atlanta, it's just so interesting to see some of the names. I know that they're dealing with injuries, but looking at their lineup, there's just so many people that I don't recognize anymore. And I know that a lot of teams have had a lot of turnover, but it's just turnover and injuries. But their center backs, Noah Cobb, who I believe is an 18-year-old center back, is starting for them, and then Luis Abram, I think, is the other center back as well. So it's just that it's not their two starters, like you were saying before, Jimmy, that they're dealing with injuries. But that's something that I think Union should be looking to exploit in this game, is to kind of run at that 18-year-old center back, those guys who are maybe a little bit more inexperienced in that big moment in their big home stadium. I haven't seen if they're expecting a sellout, but it's probably close to something along those lines. Atlanta always shows up for their team. But that might be the spot, is to hit those inexperienced players with, maybe smart runs by Carranza, or having Gazdag maybe a little bit more on the ball. We haven't seen much of that this year. But yeah, it's definitely interesting to see. I know we've been talking about the injuries to Atlanta in this game, but just looking at the lineup now that it just came out, it's just like, I don't recognize many of these players. And it's just, if that's not MLS, I don't know what is.
But you said it perfectly though, Tim. I know it's not a revolutionary idea to go about the game this way, but Curtin has been very transparent on that. Is kind of their approach, is recognize the weak link in the other team and attack that weak link. And I think there are multiple weak links in this Atlanta starting 11. I do think that they have some attacking pieces that are worth paying attention to. We just talked about Daniel Rios. Obviously, we know about Almada. I'm going to butcher his name, but Saba Labahadnitse, I believe, out on the wing. He's looked really good since he's started playing more frequently for Atlanta. So there are some pieces in the attack that I think Union will have to pay attention to and be mindful of. But at the same time, I think there's room for Union to score goals today. And especially, I didn't bring this up earlier, but Union are tied for the lead in goals from set pieces this year. 5 goals from set pieces so far this year. 3 games in a row that they've scored from a corner, and just 1 goal resulting from a penalty kick this season, which, obviously at times has kind of been a little bit of our bread and butter, if you will, get in a dangerous position, make a young defender make a play he's not comfortable making, and that in turn results in a PK, which Gazdag has been automatic with. So Union are finding different ways to get goals right now, and I think that is another thing to look out for today as well, especially with some young defenders in Atlanta's backline.
Eric, do you think there's like a specific way that the Union are going to try and play this? I mean, we kind of think it's going to be a 4-4-2 diamond, but do you think they're just going to do what they always do and look to just play super direct to the strikers and look for runs, after that first pass?
Probably, because I think they're still gonna be conscious of Almada. So I think that'll play into sitting back a little bit more than we might otherwise against the weakened lineup, because he can still create. And like Jimmy was saying, keeping in mind Rios's goal scoring record against us, we definitely want to place defensive solidity kind of at the top of the hierarchy of importance. And also, I think going direct at them is a good way to test those center backs.
Yeah.
And then kind of playing it by ear almost, and seeing how they handle that, and then making adjustments depending on where it seems like they're weakest. Now I'm trying to remember. There was something that Jimmy said that had sparked something, and now I'm forgetting it. I'll have to come back to it if I think of it.
All right. But it's just it's interesting to see with this Union team and the way that they like to approach games on the road. Like we've kind of been saying, it's not that they're always playing for the draw, but it's like they have. It's almost like it's portioned out, and Curtin is very kind of meticulous with this. It seems like it's the first 15 minutes of the game. See what the game brings you, react how the game is starting, and kind of then get into it a little bit more. Obviously if like something falls into their lap at the beginning, try and convert those chances, but it's about being defensively sound, like you were saying, Eric. And it's almost like they play in those 15-minute increments, especially on the road under Curtin. But I just have a feeling that that's kind of what we're going to see today is kind of sitting back a little bit, obviously not letting Almada on the ball as much as he would want to be on the ball. And then kind of looking to counter out of that or play direct. Jimmy, what's your take on that? I mean, it's kind of like that's how Union always play type of thought, but it's like that's just the only way I think that they're really going to come out and start this game.
Yeah, I think you're right in that. I think Curtin Jim is also talked about a lot that they're not the type of team that wants to get in those like back and forth 4-3 type of games. They don't think that they think that their chances of winning or being successful in those types of games significantly decreases when they're pulled into that. So Union are not going to want to get in a run and gun back and forth type of game, even though they are a team that can score lots of goals. So it's always going to be kind of that defensive first mentality and looking for really opportune times to hit. We see it a lot, and we've seen it a couple times this season. Jacques Glesnes is really good at it. That free kick ball before the other team's ready, or really direct ball from Jose Martinez just inside, or just on the other side of half midfield to Quinn Sullivan, knocking it down to Carranza. It's a lot of stuff like that, as opposed to the 10-12 pass buildups and getting deep into the box like we could see at Subaru Park. Not to say that those won't happen, but they're not gonna look to kind of sit on the ball and be on possession and lull you to sleep. That's not what Union do. They're going to kind of let you do that and let you get bored of coming at us, and then hit you on the break when you're showing signs of frustration and tired legs. So I think, kind of what you said of them approaching it in those 15-minute increments is exactly how, I think they do look at games that way. And getting through those first 15 minutes, I think, is going to be crucial today. Getting through that, getting settled, and then kind of pinpointing where those weaknesses in the other team are, and then kind of making your move and seeing if you can hit them at opportune times when they're not ready for it.
Yeah, it's interesting you brought up the other team getting frustrated, because I think that's something that the Union really actually look to do in those types of increments, and especially in these types of games on the road. I know, Eric, I think you brought it up. The one win that Philly had down there was in back when it was Champions League. And I remember Atlanta fans like losing their minds because they thought that the Union was, wasting too much time, or that they were being a little too physical, things like that. And I think we might see that a little bit in this game, especially now that we've mentioned Bedoya getting brought back in. You know what Brujo's going to do. He's always going to frustrate the opposing team. I think this game might look like that kind of early on, to kind of throw Atlanta off their game a little bit, kind of get more into physical altercations than thinking about soccer. And that's when Union can strike and hit on those counterattacks. It's kind of like Jim Curtin always likes to say, the dark arts of the game. And I think we might be in for one of those specials here on a Sunday afternoon, where it just kind of gets to be a little bit of shithousery, and it's just, it might be 0-0 for a long time. And then there might be, like you were saying, Jimmy, maybe an Atlanta player comes in and does a silly little foul to kind of retaliate from being frustrated. And then you see that quick free kick, that kind of sparks a chance on goal, it's actually interesting you brought that up, because that seems to be actually at the core of the Union's ethos with the first team, all the way down to, we saw it happen at GA Cup last week.
Absolutely.
17s, they won a free kick really quick. They played it up top to Jameer, was it Johnson, I think was his name?
Yeah.
I can't remember.
Yep.
And then he passed it to Kevin Sullivan for a tap-in to get back into the game. So it's so interesting to see, like, that's like the club's ethos is we're gonna piss you off for the entire game, and you're gonna foul us, and we're gonna play super fast and direct, and we're gonna score while you blink. I just think that's just really cool to see how the club has kind of built that into like the identity of the Philadelphia soccer team. It like takes on the city almost as well with that. It's just kind of interesting to see. I think that's what we're in store for here today a little bit. But we're kind of coming close to the end of the time here of our pod. So Eric, I want to throw it over to you. We know what this lineup is now. What's your kind of thoughts on the match and how it'll play out today?
I'm going to go 3-1 Union.
Okay.
I think that Carranza in particular is going to take advantage of that weekend center back pairing. I think I'm going to say we get the first goal for once we don't go down first. Then maybe they tie it up, and then we hit them with 2 late-ish goals to take the win.
Yeah.
I'm going to say Rio scores against us again. We'll go with that.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised, honestly. He just seems like that kind of player. And Jimmy, I think it was you who brought it up. You're like, I wonder how much he kind of thinks about that. I don't know. It just seems like you would remember. You'd remember that type of thing. I scored 4 goals and made it so you didn't win the league and then also host MLS Cup.
Yeah.
A little rough. But what are you thinking kind of plays out in this game today, Jimmy?
Well, one matchup I'm really interested to see that we didn't really get to talk about, and one player for Atlanta that we didn't really get to talk about, Brooks Lennon. Their right back, very, very important in their attack. He's leading almost every he leads the team in key passes, passes into the penalty area, crosses into the penalty area. The only thing he doesn't lead in passing is passes into the final third, which Almada does, and progressive passes also Almada. But Brooks Lennon right behind him in both of those categories. So he's very, very important. Caleb Wiley on the left side is also an important piece to their attack. He also gets up the pitch. And we know on the right side, Harriel and usually Quinn Sullivan really like to get up on that right side. But I'm interested to see if Union can kind of maybe change that up and go on the left this week, with Brooks Lennon being such a prominent piece in their attack and getting really, really high up the pitch, and lots of times assisting on their goals. And so I wonder if Union can look to kind of create space behind him once they do get up the pitch, and get their defense shifting out of positions they don't want to be in on the break. And like I said, making young defenders make hard plays and plays that could lead to multiple yellows or a penalty or something of the such. Those things aren't, no matter what people want to say, no ref is favoring Philadelphia teams. Us getting red cards and penalties are not, it's not a favoritism thing. It's because we put young defenders and struggling defenders in really hard positions. And so that's what I think I'm looking for this today is Union taking advantage of a young defense and people in the defense that like to get up. I'm not as high on this game as Eric. The turf scares me, to be honest. I don't have any stats to back this up. I'm going to look into it after that or after today. But I just feel from the eye test that Union don't play nearly as good on turf as they do when they're not, which obviously most teams are not going to. But I feel like they might struggle a little more than other teams for one reason or another. But that being said, we went to Portland and got a 3-1 win on turf, shorthanded, the last time we did play on turf. So maybe what I'm remembering is not as accurate as I think. So I'm gonna go with I think I wrote in my article a 1-1 draw, but I think I'm gonna go with a 2-1 win to Union. I think after talking about all this stuff, I just think Union are gonna edge this one out.
Yeah, that's interesting. I'm kind of along the same lines as you, Jimmy. I was thinking 2-1 as well. And I think it's mainly because of how the Union will get under the opposing team's skin, like how you're saying. I wouldn't be surprised if it's 1-1 late on and they win a penalty in the last 15 minutes and Gazdag converts it, or whoever else is on the field at that time if Gazdag's not. But yeah, I have a feeling that just the way that this game is going to play out, there's that certain aspect of unpredictability with new players getting thrown into the Atlanta lineup. It's their one chance to really show what they can do. So I wouldn't be surprised to see the Union try to exploit that. But if those players are up to the test, then if it's their day and they're trying to make get their one opportunity to show for their team, that could kind of go back against Philly there. But it's interesting. There's a lot on the line for this game. I know we were kind of talking about it earlier of how this game at this point in the season doesn't really matter too much. But when you look at it, with the Union going into a bye next week, if they can get a win here, they'll have the same number of wins as top of the East and top of the Supporters Shield standings, Miami. They'll have 4 wins after playing 2 less games. So that means that from what I can tell, I would think they would jump them in the standings. So MLS might say that Miami is still first just because it's Miami. But that's something that the club will want to see going into a week where they can kind of rest and have more recovery, more practice, kind of get ready for the next game, which would be Memorial Day weekend against RSL at home. That's kind of a crucial stretch as well, because that's another weekend match at home, and then they'll have the rescheduled Seattle match just a few days later. So it'll be kind of a big time where the Union will gain back to that game in hand. So we'll see how the club responds and how they play today. And I don't know. I'm with you guys. I'm confident and optimistic about them going to Atlanta and getting a win. But at the same time, I wouldn't be surprised if it's any kind of result at this point, just because we don't know how MLS goes anymore, or if we ever did. I don't know. But before we get out of here, do you guys have any final thoughts on today's match or the Union in general? I'll throw it to Eric first.
That's a good question.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot. It's nice to have a lot more optimism around the team. Than we were having relatively recently. Still, the fact that we're all predicting a win feels good. Or even a draw. Really, it's like we've been talking about. Atlanta's a tough place to play. So going into an away game at Atlanta, feeling optimistic is a nice feeling. And I really hope they can pull out a result so we can keep those good feelings going.
Yeah, I'm totally there with you. Jimmy, any final thoughts before we get out of here, get ready to watch the game?
Yeah, absolutely. Just one quick thing here.
Yeah.
We've kind of been open and back and forth on this game not being, it's not an end all be all if Union don't get 3 points or even a point down in Atlanta today. But that being said, I think Jim Curtin and his team are gonna want to win. They want to get 3 points. If you look at the standings in the Eastern Conference right now, 5 points separate teams 1 through 10, and that doesn't include Orlando, Nashville, New England, or NYCFC. All those 4 teams they're at the bottom of the Eastern Conference right now. If those teams can get going, which Orlando just got a win, NYCFC just got a win. If those teams can get going, we have an absolute crapshoot in the Eastern Conference this year. And it could be a matter of 5, I think last year it was pretty close, 1 through 5, but we could have a difference of 5 or 6 points between 1 and 10th place come the end of the season, just because of how many good teams are in this Eastern Conference right now. So that being said, it's not an end-all be-all to lose this game, but points against Eastern Conference opponents are super, super crucial right now. Obviously, you want to win every game, but watching another team that's doing well in the East get points over you is really hard to swallow, especially one that is missing a few key players. So I think at the end of the day, Union are going into this one wanting to win. That's what I'm going to leave it on there.
Yeah, you're dead on with that, Jimmy. Well, that'll do it for another episode of Doop on the Volley. I just want to give a quick shout out to the over 170 of you who are tuning in to these pregame pod episodes. It's just been really awesome to see how many Union fans have been kind of flooding in and really tuning into this, especially right now with this being a Sunday afternoon game, and we know the Sixers are on right now, the Phillies are on right now. And it's just really cool to see you guys in here and getting pumped up for this Union game. That's what we're here for. And keep following along. We're going to keep doing these pregame shows, especially for away matches. I know we want to try to start maybe looking into how we can do them for home games. It's just a little bit more tricky with everyone getting down to the stadium and finding a way to do that. But hey, maybe we'll find a way here sometime soon in this season. For next week, just because there's no match next week, we'll still do, a podcast to recap how the team did in Atlanta, whether that be a win, loss, or a draw. And then, we'll probably share our thoughts on how the first little bit of the season has gone. It's kind of been up and down, and there's lots of things that we can talk about, and we can maybe even bring some of you fans in here if you guys want to come on and give your thoughts. Maybe we can do something like that where we create like a spot for you guys to come on and share your thoughts as well. But that'll do it for this episode. See you guys later.